Well, it's another Mental Health Monday video. I'm happy that you've decided to tune in this week. We're really excited to see what God's going to do this month. And actually, as you're watching this, it is Holy Week. This is the week of Easter. You know, this within the church, this is a really exciting week. This is a week of reflection, of thankfulness, of just celebration of what Jesus has done for us. And so as you go out through this week, one, keep that in mind of not just the sacrifice that was given to you on the cross, but also the victory that you have through Jesus in this Easter season. And I hope if you don't have a church to attend, join us this Friday for Good Friday service here at South Tacoma Assembly of God, or even on Sunday morning. Come and join us Easter morning. We would love to have you. There's more than enough space for you here. But if you have your own church, I really encourage you, go attend church, fellowship with one another, grow with one another. You know, as we say frequently on these videos, everything happens in the context of relationship. You know, Jesus walked in relationship. He built in relationship. We commonly hear within church circles that it's not a religion, it's a relationship. So go out, be in relationship this week. Be in relationship with one another. Serve one another, love one another, and encourage one another this week. You know, and just build those relationships that have been put in your life, that have been gifted to you by our Father. But in those relationships, make sure that you have healthy relationships. You know, relationship can be something that is detrimental to our health if we don't go about it properly. You know, that's not the way God designed it. You know, God designed for us to be in a relationship. We go back to the beginning where God says it's not good for man to be alone. He creates Eve for Adam to be in relationship with one another as well as in relationship with him. I mean, Jesus coming was all about relationship, rebuilding that relationship between us and God that was broken because of sin. So, relationship is a really big deal. But proper relationship is what we need to be going for. And we look at broken relationships that come into these counseling offices, that come into this counseling office frequently. Broken relationship is one of the most common things that we see. Whether it's marriages or families or siblings, we see relational brokenness on a daily basis. And I'm sure as we're talking about this and you're listening right now, you can say, yeah, I see brokenness, whether in my own family or my own relationships. Well, what is it that causes broken relationship? Well, that's kind of a tough question because there are many things that could cause it. However, I want to focus on one main issue that we have seen, that I have seen throughout my practice, throughout my life, throughout the relationships that I've had. What is the biggest cause for broken relationship? In my opinion, it's boundaries. We do not understand boundaries, right? We want to love one another, we don't want to be in a relationship with one another, but we feel like that means that we have to live without boundaries. What I mean by boundaries is we need to have a place where we end and the next person begins. God didn't design us to be merged into one person, merged into one conglomerate. He designed us uniquely, where I'm a person, you're a person, and we have boundaries that separate me from you. But think about it this way. If you own a home, you have your home and your neighbor's home. You might love your neighbor. You might have the greatest neighbors in the world. But I'm going to guess that especially your backyard, you have a delineation between you and your neighbor's yard. There's a fence that goes around your yard and their yard. That fence determines what's yours and what's theirs. It separates yours from theirs. That's the way it's meant to be. And boundaries are there to protect us. They're there to show what's me, what's you. They're there to keep your stuff in and their stuff out. It's there to keep their stuff in and your stuff out. This is the way it's meant to work. Boundaries create who we are. They create the parameters in which we operate. You know, you open up your backyard with a fence or a gate there, you let your dog out, your dog can run all around and not get lost because it has boundaries. See, boundaries are there to help protect us, guide us, direct us. And when we don't have proper boundaries, we end up in situations where harm can happen. Now, I think about my sister's house, and she has, she backs up to a green belt with a walkway behind there where people are always walking. And she has this fence back there that really keeps those on the path from coming into her backyard. If she didn't have that fence, people could freely come into her backyard, could come in and damage her property, could break her windows, could steal the stuff that's in her backyard. But because she has that boundary, it keeps her and her family safe. Proper boundaries will do the same thing to your heart, to your soul, to your mind. When we let people come freely into our life without having proper boundaries, giving them access that really isn't theirs to have, you're asking for damage to happen. So in boundaries, there are two different boundaries. There are those boundaries that are for ourselves. They help protect us from the influences of others, from the attacks of others, that keep our heart, our soul protected, that keep us healthy, that protect our health. But there's also boundaries that are for others. These are the respect of other people's lawns, right? These are the boundaries that say that is theirs. I'm not going to step across their fence and damage their lawn. A great boundary for this would be you're walking your dog and you allow your dog to go onto your neighbor's lawn and poop. That's a violation of their boundaries, especially if you open the gate and you blast through their boundaries and let your dog poop in their front yard. That's a violation of boundaries. But unfortunately, many times in relationship or many times in life, this is what people do. This is what we do in relationship. We blast through people's boundaries and let the poop of our life sit on someone else's yard. And then we wonder why relationships are broken. We wonder why we get frustrated. Well, for lack of a better way to put it, we've allowed our life to break others' boundaries. See, just because you have a dog or just because you have stuff and it doesn't bother you to let that happen, doesn't mean it doesn't bother someone else. See, boundaries create respect for one another. It shows respect. This is how, as we're told to love one another, love our neighbor as ourselves. In a very practical way, we love our neighbors by respecting their property, by respecting their boundaries, by respecting this is my yard, this is your yard. We respect people and love people and respect them by showing them that respect to their boundaries. So when we blast through those, we're going to end up with relational brokenness. We're going to end up with strife. And if you've ever had relational issues, you know that that's not a very healthy place to be. Psychologically, mentally, emotionally, you're on edge. And when you're on edge, you don't feel great. When you're on edge, you're not quite yourself. You don't act the way that you would normally act because you're in that fight or flight mode. You're looking to constantly fight, constantly defend. And when we're constantly on defense, when we're looking to defend ourselves, we ball up our fists. You can't give a hug with balled up fists, right? You can't love with balled up fists. But it comes down to, what was the genesis of that? Broken boundaries. See, just because you can say something, just because you recognize something, doesn't mean you should say it. Your personal boundaries should be, if I say this, does this show love? If I say this, does this bring them closer to Christ? Does this build relationship? Or if I say this, or if I do this, does this create division? Does this look petty? Does this cause an issue? See, just because you can say it doesn't mean you should say it. And likewise, just because you care about somebody doesn't mean you should allow them to say or do whatever to you. regardless of what it causes you. If someone is out there and their actions are hurting you, their actions are causing you to be frustrated with them or frustrated with others, then maybe you need to look at the boundaries that you have set and what you've allowed in. Because really, when it comes to boundaries and it comes to our lives, we become responsible for the influences that we allow in. Let me repeat that. You are responsible for the influences that you let in. Those influences are going to come in and they're going to influence your life. And you have to understand that if you're allowing people into your life to say things and do things that are causing you harm and you're not doing anything to keep them out or mediate or mitigate their influence, then you're becoming responsible for what you're allowing in. We go back to the fence analogy. If you don't put a fence up to keep people out so that they know this is who I am, how can you be upset for them walking through your yard because you've given them free access? That it's a tough question to ask. It's something I have to ask myself because I love people. I do. And I have had a habit in the past of letting people in because I want relationship. But because of poor boundaries, I ended up getting hurt. Or I've said things because I had poor boundaries with other people that caused others to get hurt. If we want to have healthy, good relationships, if we want to operate in the context of relationship that God created us in, we need to understand that we have to have good boundaries. We have to have proper boundaries. And when we don't have boundaries, we're asking for issues. When we don't respect boundaries, we're not respecting people. So please, 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 take a look at the boundaries in your life. Take a look at what you're allowing. Take a look at what others are allowing, and if you're blowing through their boundaries, through their parameters. We need to respect each other and who they are, who God created them to be. That's how we love one another. That's one of the stepping stones to loving one another. And if you're listening to me, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Or, I hear you, but how do I do that? Let me tell you, here's a great resource for you, Boundaries. This book by Cloud and Townsend. It says here over 2 million copies sold. So I'm going to guess you've probably heard about this book, heard about this resource. But it's sold 2 million copies because it's got stuff in there that would benefit you. Even if you're great with boundaries, it'll benefit you in your relationships today. Or if you want a little more specific, my marriage is struggling. Well, I'm going to guess that you might have some boundary issues in your marriage. Get Boundaries for Marriage. And no, I'm not being paid to advertise for these books. I just really believe in the content that is in here. If we can get the content that is in here and understand the context of relationship, we can go so much further in our relationships, in the kingdom of God. We can accomplish so much more if we're not fighting with one another and respecting one another and each other's boundaries. So I thank you for watching this. Share this video, like this video, let people know that this is out there. That this is a resource that we do for you, but we want to also have this resource available to your friends, your family, your coworkers, even people we've never met. So like, share, comment. If you have comments on this, you want more, we only know really what you want, what you're looking for if you let us know. So, send us a chat message, send us an email, send something with some of your questions. And I promise that we will get to your questions that you have in future videos. So thank you. I hope this has been a informative time for you. And I hope you have an awesome, amazing Easter week as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus this week. God bless. I'll see you next week.